Hi, everyone. My name is Beth Sheffield, Adult Programming Coordinator at the Greensboro Public Library. Welcome to Soul Food Looks Back, a conversation with Carla Hall and Jessica B. Harris. This is part of our citywide celebration for Juneteenth, and we're so honored to have you ladies here today. I want to say on behalf of the Greensboro Public Library and the Greensboro Public Library Foundation, to all those in our audience, welcome to the program. Thank you, those of you that support our Library Foundation. It's because of you that we have great programming like this. If you'd like to learn more about the YouTube channel or the cookbooks or Greensboro Learning Circles, check out our website at www.greensborolibrary.org. Now it's my pleasure to turn over the conversation to Ms. Carla Hall and Ms. Jessica B. Harris. Ladies, let's talk a little bit about your beginnings and the connection of food and culture.
I think my earliest memories about my food was at my grandmother's house. I think that's probably similar to a lot of people. Sunday suppers, after church, going to her house in Lebanon, Tennessee. I did not think that I was going to be in food. I thought that I was going to be an actor. Before that, I thought I was going to be a cartoonist. And then I thought I was going to be a race car driver. The race car driving was just sort of, that would be fun. Definitely something creative, but I ended up being an accountant. And it wasn't until I left accounting and decided that I really had to find a passion, and I didn't know what that was. And food sort of came about through friendships and socialization when I was in Paris. With one of Jessica's friends, we found out.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah, who was that?
Elaine.
Oh gosh, it was a dear friend of mine named, at that point in time, she was Elaine Evans. She is now Khadija Evans. And so we connected on food through Elaine, me at one end of the chain, Carla at another.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. You know what I'm realizing, Jessica, talking about that chain though, you were at the beginning of the chain. I mean, in terms of the three of us, and then you tagged Elaine, and then Elaine tagged me with the interest. It's crazy because that really was the turning point that started my interest in cooking.
So it was really kind of wild to discover that very inadvertently, I had a hand in starting Carla being interested in food. So
yes.
But yeah, it's wacko. And my beginnings are a little like Carla's. I started out with the food at my grandmother's house, but I am not a Southerner. Although my father was originally from Tennessee, from Centerville, Tennessee. I grew up as a Northerner. I grew up in New York City, in Queens. But my paternal grandmother was actually seriously rooted in the South. And so I grew up eating and being very Southern. My first times back in the South, I was a full-grown adult, but everybody kept saying, boy, you do Southern really well, because I can ma'am with the best of them. You know, we've had great fun. I didn't know that I was going to end up in food either. Like Carla, I wanted to be an actress. I, at that point, even went to the High School of Performing Arts in New York, you know, sort of fame, I'm going to live forever. But I went through, I worked at Essence as a journalist. I started writing about food through travel because I've always traveled. My college major was French, so I speak fluent French, and I'd always traveled. And so the idea of travel and food and culture was something that kind of came together with me. I do have to say though, Carla, never wanted to be a race car driver. In fact, even though I have a valid New York City driver's license, which I renew with religious fervor, I am a native New York City child and basically a non-driver.
What were some of the aha moments that you had along your travel?
My ancestors are from the Yoruba people from Nigeria, and the Booby people from Bioko Island. And those were two different tests. Like on my mom's side was Nigerian, and then on my dad's side, the Booby people of Bioko Island. And so when I was at the embassy of Nigeria, and it was revealed to me about there were only 3 ships that came from Bioko Island to Virginia. And so when you go to the Museum of African American History and Culture, they list the numbers of the slave ships. And so when you think of one of 3 my ancestors were on, it was pretty incredible. You know, so that just got me to thinking more deeply about my food.
Well, again, Carla, we are at sort of, for years, I have said, I really don't want to know. I have, in fact, spent a fair amount of time on the African continent, and I know that I have affinities. I've seen people who look like my father in Senegal. You know, I've seen folks who look like my relatives in a variety of places. And I have certainly made friends who have become family in Senegal, in Benin, and in other parts of the continent.
With water. And then we had the shrimp that maybe had some peppers and onions, you know, maybe if you wanted to, some fresh tomatoes, but it was a really simple dish. But the sweetness of the shrimp, you didn't want to cover up because that was the star, right? And even when you think about how those dishes came about and how they changed as they went into restaurants, and there was and people were more affluent and they had more resources. But when you strip back all of the things that we have put on our food, that was a huge aha for me. And so when I went from that, I'm like, okay, what else? What else have we changed? And how can I go back with my food to these dishes, strip back all of the stuff that we put onto it to get back to a healthier version that really is more sustainable for our bodies today?
Absolutely, absolutely. But you also bring up something again with the whole idea of we are all lactose intolerant. Some of us are not.
Right, right.
Because I mean, if you think about the people who were herders, who lived on cattle and from cattle, you didn't kill the cattle, drank the milk, and you made some form of fermented beverage or cheese or whatever.
Let's talk a little bit about this, a cultural appropriation versus sort of cultural honoring. You know, what is soul food? You know, it's you know, you see that term, but let's just go there. What is soul food to both of you? What do you think about that?
Pretty much every cuisine has, you know, food for the soul of one sort or another. I think that the terminology comes out of a time that I certainly remember when everything was soul. You had a, you know, soul brother and soul sister, and there was a beauty salon where Elaine worked that we referred to earlier called Soul Scissors. You know, there was soul everything, and I think soul food is a part of that. Now, somebody like Adrian Miller, who's actually written a book on the history of soul food, would be able to give you the exact etymology and when the term first appeared. And I unfortunately have, if I knew it, it's gone. And I suspect I didn't know it in any case. But this term has now been equated with the food of African Americans. Africa is not a country, it's a continent. African American food is not monolithic. There are regionalisms, there are localisms even. If you get down to it, people who cook gumbo in X part of New Orleans aren't like people who cook gumbo in Y part of New Orleans. And some folks eat potato salad in their gumbo. Some folks eat rice in their gumbo. Some folks may eat both in their gumbo. So you've got all of these different things that are somehow or other subsumed under that's soul food. And it becomes at the same time honoring, because you are talking about your soul, you are talking about it is food that feeds you, but limiting, because on top of that, we've got a whole nother set of of inequities that are being set up, that are being in their own ways established. You know, I did X in this, I won Y in that, I am this, that, and the other. But who does the laying on of hands? Who does that, putting you on that pedestal or wherever it is you are? Who is that? And does that person understand you, your food, your background, your culinary traditions, any of that? Where are you from? And Carla's nodding her head like she in church.
I am nodding my head like I'm in church, because I also think about how when you ask, I don't care who it is, a man or a woman, who was their influence in the kitchen? And many times they will go back to a woman. And so, and many times I've seen people go back to somebody who was a caretaker in their home. I mean, like a domestic.
Look at traditional gendered food roles. It was always mistress of the stew pot, that long, low, and slow cooking, master of the flame. I mean, men tend to, and these are all gross generalities, tend to cook over live fire. Women tend to cook on hearths in some other kind of way, even if it is fire in, you know, on a potager, a stew hole stove, a large, you know, hearth cooking. But it's a different kind of mastery that is, up until very recently, was always very gendered. When we look at professional kitchen, we go to France and we look at Escoffier and folks like that there who codified it, and who codified it like an army, which is why it's called a kitchen brigade, brigade de cuisine. But when you look at that, then one of the things that I always contend when I lecture is, and when Escoffier got home, he expected his wife to have a meal on the table. So that we've got this divergence between the professional kitchen, the brigade, and that home cooking, which the French sometimes call la cuisine bourgeoise. You know, it's all of those wonderful mama cooks in Lyon. And I've forgotten what, but they are those women who are the nurturers and who are the culture bearers. Women are the culture bearers. So it becomes that whole culture bearing, nurturing aspect of food that takes place on the, what used to be called, probably not.
But if you're just intellectually trying to get this dish, when you can see the person, and Jessica, I think that's such a great idea. When you can see them cooking, you are almost reliving that moment of seeing them. And then the written.
Who are some chefs you're excited about? Who are some new, you know, up and coming chefs?
There are people that I know and that I, you know, I trust and go to, but generally speaking, I am not necessarily a follower of new chefs. I mean, there's J.J. Johnson in New York. There's Omar Tate in Philly. There are a lot of people who are private chefs.
There's so many Black chefs you don't see, you don't know, because you're expecting to find them in restaurants when they are in hotels and they're doing private chefing. And I, in anticipation of you asking that, Beth, I was just snooping around online, and that's honestly how I find people. That's how I find restaurants, because I'm always traveling, and I will go online like, where's the best restaurant and blah, 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 where are the Black chefs and blah, 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 blah. And I found this article of private chefs in Charlotte. And they listed like several Black private chefs, and their businesses have exploded during the pandemic because people weren't going out and they still wanted to celebrate at home. And I jotted down a couple of names because I was like, wow, this is really great. Because I've been traveling around, it's easy to go into a town, you're planning a dinner, you're like, you know what, I think I'll hire one of these people to come into the house and just so I can have a dinner with some friends. But it was Taylor Worsley, Lisa Brooks of Heart and Soul, Keisha LaShawn Corbett, Joya Courtney, Chef Tracy Mitchell, Anthony Smith, Chianti Peak, Kevin Winston. And this was an article written by Charlotte Five. And I thought it was really impressive, especially because one of the projects that I'm working on is with a play, and it talks about food and song and music and everything. It's called Grace. And it talks about the 5 Philadelphia catering companies. And that's where you find a lot of Black chefs. And another reason that I brought it up is because I remember a guy coming up to me years ago, and he was like, so I remember you from Top Chef. So what are you doing now? And I mentioned that I was in catering, and he was like, oh, is that all? And I was like, wait, what? I mean, it was so offensive to me. And I think that we place so much value on restaurants, and it's great. It's also great for the community. I mean, there's so many wonderful things about restaurants, but there's also another side. And that's why I specifically wanted to give a shout out to these personal chefs and a couple of other chefs that I love. Ashley Shanty, who was in Asheville, and she was at Benny on 3rd, but she's moved on. So I have to see what she's doing. And then way out, completely different coast in Portland, Gregory Gourdet. And Gregory has a cookbook coming out this fall. And I was really impressed with it. And it's keto. Everything's made from scratch, including the like the hot sauce and everything. I was like, okay. But there's so many people doing great things, you know, Eduardo Jordan, you know, out west, you know, Kwame Nwachi.
Really look forward to both of you coming to Greensboro. I sincerely hope, you know, that everything works out, that, you know, sooner than later we can get together in person. And, you know, you guys can explore some of the food traditions we have you know, here in this area. And that, you know, you will, you know, come visit the Greensboro Public Library and you know, and we can continue this wonderful conversation. I really
love it. Well,
yeah.
I'll see you in the fall.
Yes.
I'll see you as soon as I can. You take good care.
Thank you.